Hello and welcome to the B attributes course. And today we're going to talk about any lights and reverse lights. So before we go into any lights and reverse lights, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what a global attribute is. So reverse lights is one global attribute. So um, when reverse lights asks, are the object's reverse lights activated? And on, off, or can't tell can be selected. So based off of uh, if there's just one single frame where we see the reverse lights on, then on will be selected on all frames based off of the frame that we've selected reverse lights to be on for. So in the frame where we see the reverse lights activated, when we select on for that frame, it'll set all the frames to on. Same thing with any lights. If we see one frame where the lights on a vehicle are on and we change that frame's any lights attribute to on, it'll change all the rest of the frames on that attribute to on as well. So let's talk about what any lights are. So any lights is literally any lights that can be seen on a vehicle. So if you see any activated lights on a vehicle, whether they be bottom lights of the car, uh, side lights, or just flashing lights, any lights that can be seen on the car, we will select. We want to any lights that are activated, we select on. Same thing with cabin lights or interior lights. If we see interior lights on, um, we this is another example where we would select on for any lights. Same thing with reverse lights, parking lights, fog lights, any kind of light that we can find uh, that's activated. That's how we will choose on for any lights. So here's an example of a car driving down the road, and as soon as it drives beneath the overpass, we're able to see its headlights are on. So that's an example of when we want to set any lights, the any lights attribute to on. And another example here, this car is driving down the road, and for a couple frames, we see its signal light activate. And so any lights should be on in this instance as well. So when do we turn any lights off? Like when do we set it to off? So if in all the frames we don't see uh, any lights that are activated on the car, and if we at least see one frame where we can clearly see that its lights are off, then we want to set any lights to off. So in this case, there's a car that's like driving down the road and its lights are not on. Um, if in every other frame we don't see any lights turn on, then we'll select any lights to be off on that vehicle. Same thing with these cars. If at no point we see their lights turn on, we're able to clearly see whether lights are on or off in these instances. So, we can see that they're off in this frame. So if in the other frames they are not, none of the lights turn on any of the cars, then we're going to select off. So when do we select can't tell? So we select can't tell when we look at every single frame of a vehicle and we're not able to determine whether lights are on or off. So in these cases, in all the frames 1 through 80, um, we don't have a clear picture of whether the lights are on or off. If the car is too far away or too occluded by other vehicles, in this case, that car got occluded, and before that, we can't really make out whether its lights are on or off or not. So we want to put can't tell. In this example, this car is visible, but its lights are occluded. So we can't get a clear picture of its lights because of the freeway divider. And so we're going to put can't tell. Critical errors can be made on any lights, so we want to avoid those. So clearly we have a car with its headlights on facing the SDC, and that we can see in camera view very easily, and its any lights attribute is set to off. This is a critical error. We can clearly see that the lights are on, and we want to set the any lights attribute to off. All right, and here is the correct form of this case for any lights. We see that its headlights on, so we want to select on for any lights. All we need to see is just one frame where its lights are on, and that's enough for us to set any lights to all the frames if we see one frame where its lights are on. Excuse me. Here is another example where the any lights are set to can't tell. How do I know that? It's because the cuboid color is green, and the attribute on any lights for can't tell is green. So this is it really can't tell? No way. We see that the lights are off, so we're going to select off. And that is only the case if in no other frame are we able to clearly see its lights turn on. Because we have a clear view of its lights off in at least one frame, if we don't see any of its lights on or in any other frame, then we're going to select off. Yeah. Check all the frames before setting any lights to off to ensure lights don't activate or cannot clearly be determined in other frames. Here are some other examples of when you can put can't tell on any lights. So if you can't clearly see whether the lights are on or off because of glare, in the first example it's the headlights, and in the second example it's the tail lights or the backlights. There's a glare, so it makes it very difficult to know whether the lights are on or off in these examples. So that's another appropriate time to put can't tell on any lights. But that's not to get confused with this example. This example, we can clearly see that the lights are off. And no label zones. So how do we treat any lights on no label zones? So if any lights attribute is there on a no label zone, then we're going to want to select. We don't want to select off, and we don't want to select on. So what are we going to select? We're going to select can't tell. That's the only correct answer for no label zones, okay? All right, so moving on to reverse lights. So reverse lights asks, are the object's reverse lights activated? And we can choose on, off, or can't tell. So reverse lights asks if reverse lights are turned on or off and are visible in camera view for any of the frames. So there's an example of some reverse lights that are on, and right next to it is an example of reverse lights that are off. And then we have a perfect example of when we would select can't tell. When we don't see the back of the car in any frame, or the car is too far away or too occluded to see. So what are reverse lights? Uh, Reverse lights are the white lights on the back of vehicles that turn on when a vehicle is driving backwards. And what are not reverse lights? The red lights on the back of the cars are brake lights, and those are not to be confused with reverse lights. Reverse lights are white lights, and brake lights are red. Okay. So if reverse lights can be seen in any of the frames on a vehicle, then reverse lights must be set to on for all the frames. That's because it's a global attribute. If the reverse light status can be determined as off in at least one frame, select off on reverse lights. Uh, and that's if in no other frame you're able to see whether if you're able to see the reverse lights being on. But this speaks more to whether selecting can't tell as an option on reverse lights or off. So in this example, the car, we can see its back lights very clearly at some point. We see that the reverse lights are not on its back lights. So we could choose off um, on that car for its reverse lights because we see for sure that its reverse lights are off. But in this case, where if the back of a vehicle cannot be seen in any of the frames or is too far away to tell, the reverse lights attribute must be set to can't tell on all the frames. So there, right there, is a small car driving down the road. We are in front of it, and we don't get any good view of its backlights. And so that is a time where we have to put can't tell for its reverse lights status. All right, let's see some critical errors. So another critical error here, if we have this view of this car that's right behind us, and and we don't see the backlights of the vehicle in any of the frames, then we can't select off. We have to select. Uh, we can't select off because we don't get a clear view. We don't know for sure whether its reverse lights activate. So this is wrong. We don't want to put off. Um, it may You might get the idea, oh, the car's driving down the road, so I know its reverse lights aren't on. Well, um, it's not based off of that. It's based off of what you're able to see. So we can't tell whether the reverse lights are on or off or not. Okay? Thanks. Okay, cool. So here is the better example. So reverse lights are, not visible in the camera view for all the frames in this instance. So we're gonna put can't tell because it's the same view of the object for the entire scene. Here's some other examples of when we can't tell what the reverse light status is. These are when the object is too blurry in the camera view. Same thing here. It's a little too difficult to make out the lights on these cars. So we're gonna put can't tell. Another instance where we would put can't tell is if there is a glare that doesn't allow us to fully see what the status is on the tail lights or the back lights. But in summary, select can't tell if you can't confidently determine whether a vehicle's uh, either any lights or reverse lights are on or off. Check every single frame to be certain about an attribute selection. And if lights never turn on and are off in at least one frame and can't tell in different frames, just choose off. Hello, and welcome to this B attributes course on the parked and towing attributes. So first we'll start off with a parking attribute. So parking attribute is a global attribute, and it asks, is the object parked? And when a when we want to select yes, it has to be for a object or a car that's parked in every single frame of the task, and it does not show any intention to move soon. So cars at stoplights, you don't want to put as parked, or cars at a stop sign, you don't want to put as parked either. You want to include cars that are stopped on the side of a freeway with or without hazard lights on, and cars parked in driveways against the curb or in a parking lot that the SDC is in. So you would select no on the parking attribute if the object was not parked in every frame during the scene, and or if the car is parked in some frames but begins to move later on. You don't want to put the parked attribute as yes in those frames. You want to make it no. So this includes like cars stopped with the intention to move again. So cars at a stoplight, cars at an intersection uh, that have their brake lights on, cars waiting to go to a toll booth, cars pulled over to make way for emergency vehicles, cars that are stopped while loading or unloading passengers. You want to put no on the parking attribute in these cases. And then when do you put can't tell on parked? So if the object is too far away to tell what the status is of its parking, you put can't tell. If you can't determine with reasonable certainty that the parking status is based on LiDAR and camera views. If you can't determine it, put can't tell. So the towing attribute. So the towing attribute asks, is the vehicle towing or being towed? So being towed means that the vehicle or trailer is being towed by another visible vehicle. If you cannot see the towing vehicle, you can decide with reasonable certainty that it is in fact being towed by another vehicle, like a shipping container, um, or any other object that's obviously being towed. Um, you want to put towing when the vehicle is towing another vehicle that you can visibly see the trailer attached. So in this example, you see the pickup truck. It's obviously towing the trailer that's carrying the boat. And there's also the last option, which is neither. So is the vehicle towing or being towed? And it's neither. So that means it's not being towed and it's not towing. So this is the case for a lot of vehicles. A lot of cars are just driving by themselves. They're not towing, and they're not being towed. So those are obvious choices when you would choose neither. Um, you can also choose this option if you are really uncertain whether the object is towing or